Whichever way you put it, breakbuilding in snooker has improved massively over the past 40 years. Why do you think that is? Well, I asked you in 2 separate polls on my community page, and I also consulted the professionals and asked them why they think breakbuilding has got so much better today. First up, former Northern Ireland Open champion Mark King. I asked him why he thought breakbuilding had improved and told him that there had been a lot of comments focusing on technology.
Hi Tom, how you doing, mate? I must admit I do I think the balls, the cloth do make a massive difference in this day and age to breakbuilding, because what happens is, in the olden days where the cloths were a lot slower and the balls were different weights, basically when you open the pack in them days, they didn't really open that well, because obviously the cloth was slower, harder to get more action on the cue ball. So I've got to agree with the people that said, like, you know, the reason why there's so many breaks these days, because when you go into the pack, the balls just open, they spread, because the cloth's so fine. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's all about the cloth, and the balls makes a massive difference to the breakbuilding. Hope you're well, mate.
So then, Mark King thinks it's mostly down to technology. He thinks that the balls and the cloths have improved as such that you can get more action on the cue ball, which opens up the balls easier and allows players to have better control and in turn, bigger breaks. Next up, former top 64 player Ian Burns. Ian believes the pockets are tighter than ever, but the cloths are slicker, meaning you can have more control over the white ball. And like Mark King, he mentions that the pack is much easier to split nowadays. And now Adam Duffy, the player who Ronnie O'Sullivan made his 11th 147 against, so he has witnessed firsthand the best break builder of all time playing on newer tables. He's less adamant that technology is a big factor, but does say that the balls are more important than the tables. And then we come to Mark Davis, the former world number 12, who gave a bit of a different view. Mark Davis clearly accepts that the better cloths are a factor, but the players have to be even better now than they had to be on the slower cloths due to the reactiveness. He's the only pro out of the 4 to refer to the standard, and that's what I want to talk about. But before I do, let's hear from Dan Murin, host of the Snooker Hall podcast, to see why he thinks breakbuilding has improved recently.
There are a number of factors at play in this debate. The advancement of technology is one factor, yes. It can't be dismissed completely. For example, the material composition of the balls is more reliable these days. We have a more reactive cloth, the new chalk, which causes fewer kicks. These developments must make some sort of difference, but I don't think better equipment is the primary reason why we're seeing more centuries and more maximums. I think, in a strange way, the evolution and improvement in safety play, especially over the past decade or so, has had a weird knock-on effect on how players approach breakbuilding. Players don't want to get bogged down in negative play, long frames. There's enough snooker on the calendar as it is, without dragging out the games that they're already playing. A lot of players try to win as quick as they can. A little while ago, an experienced pro told me that breaks in the 40s and 50s are not enough. You need to be hitting breaks in the 60s, 70s, killing frames with one visit before your opponent gets a chance. And it's that last part which stuck with me the most. Before your opponent gets a chance. If you're at the table, you're in control. Your opponent is powerless. Engaging in a safety battle could hand the initiative back to your opponent. Why would you do that? Take the risk yourself, play an aggressive shot, open up the pack, and if it goes well, you will be the one to reap the rewards, and you could kill a frame in 10 minutes, done. When I think of the players who approach breakbuilding with an attacking mindset, I think Neil Robertson, Ronnie O'Sullivan, Stuart Bingham, Sean Murphy, Luca Brissell. It's no coincidence that they're all former world champions, and between them, they've knocked in something like 4,000 century breaks. That change in mindset is the biggest reason why breakbuilding numbers have gone to the next level over the past few seasons.
So Dan Murin thinks the standard of breakbuilding has been driven up by the quality of the safety play at the top, which I definitely agree with. The fact that all the top boys are capable of playing excellent safety these days means they do not want to get involved in drawn out battles. Therefore, the reward for playing riskier shots, more attacking cannons and taking the ball by the horns has never been more profitable. Another person who thinks the standard has gone up is Sam Craigie, another professional who was kind enough to get involved in the video, so a big thanks to him. Sam thinks technology plays a part, but there are clearly other factors such as science and the overall prize money on offer to make sure the standard is higher generally. Hi guys, I just want to say a massive thank you to all 4 pros for getting involved with the video. Mark King, first of all, for giving me a 1-minute voice note, absolute legend. Ian Burns for being the first pro to get back to me. Adam Duffy for just being an all-round nice guy, you know, getting involved, legend. And Mark Davis for giving me a balanced view, not just speaking about technology, but also talking about the standard on tour. Big thanks to all 4 of those guys, absolute legends. And also thank you to Dan Murin, host of the Snooker Hall podcast. I'll put a link to his podcast in the description. You know, a friend of the channel. Big thanks to him for giving me a detailed view on breakbuilding. Guys, if you want to see more stuff like this, like the video, subscribe if you're new. I'm trying to get to 2,000 subscribers. The more and more traction I get, the more and more quality I can bring to you. The more pros, the more analysis, the more interviews, the more opinions. Guys, I will get this channel as big as possible with your help. So give me a like, subscribe if you're new. Cheers. Over the past few weeks, I've had lots of comments that have been adamant that technology is the most important factor in modern breakbuilding, and I'll be completely honest with you, I think that's incorrect. Yes, it's definitely an important factor as the professionals have confirmed, but I think a lot of us can look at the past with rose-tinted glasses on and be reluctant to accept that things have improved and evolved. Technology is important in my opinion, but as Mark Davis and Sam Craigie mentioned, the standard now is so much higher. There are 2 really important points in snooker history where breakbuilding has improved clearly. First of all, the early 1990s. This is the period where Stephen Hendry was world number 1, and the younger players coming through such as Ken Doherty, Peter Ebdon and the class of 92 were clearly better breakbuilders than the 80s champions such as Dennis Taylor and Cliff Thorburn. With all due respect to those players in the 80s, can anybody really say with a straight face that the main reason for O'Sullivan and co being better breakbuilders than the likes of Dennis Taylor and Cliff Thorburn is due to tables or balls? Come on. The reason for the influx in better breakbuilding in the early 1990s was due to the increased professionalism in the game, the evolving attacking style that had been progressed by Stephen Hendry, and the fact that the 80s snooker boom had increased participation in the sport. The players who had learned their trade in the 60s and 70s had mostly been enthusiasts who couldn't play snooker as a full-time job. They were good at snooker because they loved it, but by the early 1990s, snooker was a viable career option for someone who loved snooker but was also good at it. The early 90s improvement in breakbuilding is because the players who were now at the top of the game were thoroughly better than they had been 10 or 15 years previously, because the overall standard and amount of players had increased. And then we come to the second period, which has been massively important, the early 2010s. And this influx in centuries and big breaks is due to one thing, or rather one person: Barry Hearn. Increasing the snooker tour from 8 events to 30 events means more matches. More matches means more frames, and more frames means more centuries. Also, with more tournaments, means the players are always match fit. There are no massive gaps in the calendar, so the levels of professionalism and consistency amongst the top professionals is really high. This has allowed players such as Judd Trump and Neil Robertson to score over 100 centuries in a season, and for Ronnie O'Sullivan to become the first player to make over 1,000 centuries. These milestones have then influenced players to play for centuries more often. Century scoring is now seen as a huge barometer of how good a player is, because snooker has evolved. It's a potting game. You may notice when I referred to 80s players, I didn't actually mention Steve Davis. Now this is for a specific reason. In one of my videos recently, I included a snippet where Steve spoke about the standard in the 1980s, and I'll put it in this video too.
No disrespect to those players, but I would say the general standard wasn't as high as you may think. When I say these players weren't as good, I'm talking about myself as well. I don't think the general standard was as high as it is today by any means, and I think it's always improved, it's gone up. But I was obviously head and shoulders, if not a bit higher, at some stages above the rest of the player. Where I was very good was being constantly on it. So during a match, when I was 5-0 in front, I was even thinking, focusing even harder. So I'd say one of my greatest strengths was the ability to not ease up. And I think that was probably where I was able to slaughter people. But there wasn't anybody around of your level, Stephen Hendry's level, John Higgins' level, to challenge me. Timing's important, and I think I was in the right place at the right time.
Now, Davis might be being slightly humble about his own ability and talking up his rivals such as Hendry, but he was onto something. Steve Davis was a winner, and he was a winner because he was professional. And because he was professional, he was head and shoulders better than any snooker player in the 1980s. Now, does that mean if every snooker player in the 80s trained as hard as Steve, they would not be able to beat him because he was just better than them? Absolutely not. But they were unprofessional. They did drink alcohol. They did stay up late. They did mostly smoke and go partying. That was the culture. As soon as players such as Davis and Hendry came along, these guys fell like apples off a tree. They just weren't good enough anymore. Breakbuilding improved in the 90s because players were more professional, they worked harder, they studied harder, and in turn, that made them better. So sure, Ronnie O'Sullivan and Judd Trump may have made less centuries if they were playing with 1980s equipment. I don't doubt that, but I'd argue if you'd plonked Ray Reardon, Dennis Taylor, Cliff Thorburn and Alex Higgins on the tour in 2025, they would struggle far more than O'Sullivan and Trump would with 80s technology. And the overall consensus from you guys is similar to mine, that technology is a factor, but it's part of a plethora of reasons for why breakbuilding has improved. For what it's worth, I think the most important factor is the increased professionalism. You can't just rely on talent anymore, you've got to work hard. That work ethic is part of what makes a top player a top player. Alex Higgins wouldn't survive today because he simply wouldn't have the work ethic. So yes, he wouldn't be good enough to be in the top 16 or to make 100 centuries a season in my opinion. So did those 80s players make less centuries because they couldn't split the pack open as easily as Judd Trump can nowadays? I'll let you decide.